What's going on, everybody? I'm AJ. I'm your host of the Blue to Green podcast. Thank you very much for sitting down and listening and watching whatever you're doing, wherever you're consuming your podcasts or YouTube or whatever. On this episode, I sat down with a representative from the organization, The Last Prisoner Project. Mariah, who came on, sat on the show, brought me a bunch of really cool gifts. She brought me a book of all their constituents and explaining what The Last Prisoner Project is. And for those who don't know, and I didn't know until a couple of weeks prior to sitting down with Mariah, The Last Prisoner Project is an organization that is working on a daily basis to get people out of prison who are for cannabis charges on the federal side for the most part. They do a little bit of state work, but for the most part, their stuff is on the federal side. This is a very cool episode, and I learned a lot. I learned a lot about how many prisoners are still in prison for. There's a lot of nuance to their cases. I understand that, but at the same time, they're in prison for using a substance that those of us in recreational states and medical marijuana states get to enjoy openly and freely. They're rotting in prison for many, many years. Some are in for life. I just wanted to thank the founders of Last Prisoner Project for doing what they're doing. It's Steve D'Angelo, Andrew D'Angelo, and then Dean Reyes. And again, I'm getting this all from their website, which you can go to at lastprisonerproject.org. And they have a ton of ambassadors for their organization. Jim Belushi, Fab Five Freddy, Revolution, the band. They have actors, actresses, political activists, artists, just a ton of people that are connected with this program because they believe in it. So I hope we all learn something. I hope we all come to an understanding the fact that those of us who use a plant-based medicine should not be marginalized. Those who have used plant-based medicine should not have been marginalized. And those who use it recreationally, what's the difference? It's no different than alcohol. And actually, it's completely safer than alcohol. Personal opinion there, but science does back that up as well. So I hope we all listen, or I hope we all learn something from listening and have a little bit more understanding of the fact that a lot of these people are not criminals. A lot of these people do not belong to be in prison. And again, if we can come to an understanding the fact that there's been a lot of bad data and a lot of bad science regarding cannabis, its uses, its medicinal benefits, and particularly its effects on the body and mind, the human body and the human mind. So I hope you enjoy this episode. I highly, highly, highly encourage you to go to lastprisonerproject.org. And there is something that I want to press, and that is the fact that dispensaries can get on board with donating to the Last Prisoner Project. You know, you go to McDonald's, you order your food, and you can throw your change in that little Ronald McDonald House charity bucket or whatever so that they can collect money for that. Well, guess what? You can do the same thing. Dispensaries can get on board with the Last Prisoner Project and do the same thing. And it's my understanding, as Mariah stated on the podcast here, that here in Arizona, Sunday Goods is doing that. So why aren't the rest of you dispensaries doing that? These are your customers. These are your clientele. These are people who could be coming and spending their money at your shops. And all we got to do is support them. So thank you very much for taking the time to listen. I hope we all have a good time, and let me know what you think. Thank you very much. Take care.
All right, he threw some things out of the car right there. He's throwing some things out the passenger side. They're along the wall, the slow lane wall. 619, he's throwing dope out the window. We got bills of marijuana coming out.
619, I copy bills of marijuana coming out of the window at 2328.
Perfect.
All right. So we are live on everything. Everything is recording. We are good to go. So, all right. Please introduce yourself. Hello. Thank you for coming.
Hello. I'm Mariah Daly. Thank you so much for having me, AJ. I am our Criminal Justice Initiative Director.
And our is the Last Prisoner Project. All
That's
right.
LPP for short.
Gotcha.
So that's our legal program, and I am the director of that.
Okay. And so if you could just kind of give a little background, what is, I Googled and looked up and all that, but what exactly is, see, something inevitably happens. I'll hit a button or something like that. So my pad has little things. My hand just hit it on accident. We do that.
I like that. That's a nice sound effect.
That's the first time that's ever happened. So what is the Last Prisoner Project?
So the Last Prisoner Project is a 501c3 nonprofit. and we work to free cannabis prisoners and also to redress the past and continuing harms of unjust cannabis criminalization.
Okay. And how did this come about? How was the Last Prisoner Project started?
So it was started in 2019 by Steve and Andrew D'Angelo, our co-founders, and a veteran musician, someone in the music business, who's Dean Reyes. I don't know if you're familiar with him.
Not with the name. What band are they with?
I just know he's a music vet. I think he's more like production side.
Okay, gotcha.
So yeah, he founded it in 2019, and so I've been with them since 2020.
Okay.
I don't realize how much I say until you're like on the podcast, and then I'm like
And you got it stuck in your ears.
Yeah, exactly.
That's all right. Don't worry about it.
So yeah, we got started in 2019. I've been there since 2020. This is my first job out of law school.
Okay.
So I'm not an attorney. So I'm just directing. I'm more on the operational side of things. So what I do is I work with our partners at the National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers to assign pro bono assistance for clemency relief, compassionate release, sometimes resentencing, and once they're out, early termination of supervised release. And we also work with attorneys on some state cases to do parole, resentencing, state clemency petitions, that sort of thing.
Is it just here in Arizona? Because obviously we're here in Arizona, or is this all across the country?
So we mostly do federal. The whole team works from home. We're spread out all over the place. Nice. We have someone in Hawaii. We have someone in New York, Connecticut, here, Louisiana. We have people all over the place, and we mostly do federal cases, but we also do DC, Colorado, Virginia, and New York.
For state stuff.
Yes, for at least for the legal representation. But we also have, and I have my little list here. We do policy.
She came prepared.
We do policy work in California, Hawaii, Minnesota, New Mexico, New Jersey, Delaware, Maryland, Connecticut. Okay. So we do work in a lot of different states, even if it's not necessarily legal, because we have a few different programs that we operate within Last Prisoner Project.
Okay. So, but some of it is also dealing with helping write state laws and stuff like that.
Yes.
Such as the organization I'm with, Arizona Normal.
Yes. So gotcha. It's a three-prong approach. It's intervention, advocacy, and awareness. So we have an advocacy team, and that does like our socials, operates our letter writing guide, does storytelling, our newsletter, provides commissary money to our constituents who are still incarcerated. Then we have legal program, which is what I just described. Okay. I'm the director of that. And then we have reentry, which is we help with the job readiness program, help them reintegrate into society, give them grants. And then the last one is policy. And that's where we get involved with sponsoring bills, and we go testify in certain states. And policies mostly, their priorities are for resentencing and release of cannabis prisoners currently incarcerated, which there are 40,000, and that's a minimal estimate, that are currently incarcerated for cannabis in the United States right now, 40,000.
Federally? Or just across the country?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So, and then the second priority is record clearance, automatic record clearance.
Expungements.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
So, regarding the federal side of the house, is it just, it's not for possession? I'm assuming. I'm making the assumption. What are most of the people still in prison for cannabis in prison for? Is it sales? What is it mostly for?
So when we have people in federal prison for cannabis charges, there actually sometimes is a possession charge. The thing is that other charges get tacked on.
You have to possess it in order to have possession with intent to sale. Mm-hmm. You always have that component of possession.
Exactly. And then also if you're, they say, they throw on additional charges like operating a continuing criminal enterprise, drug trafficking. Even if you're not using the gun like in a crime, if you have guns like in a drug house or something, drug drug trafficking, possession of a firearm, and furtherance of a drug trafficking crime.
Gotcha.
924C, which is a enhancement.
Federal code.
Yeah, and then we have conspiracy, you name it.
RICO.
RICO. So once you have any of those predicate offenses, you can really just tack them on. And then there's also 3 strikes laws depending on the state, habitual offender laws federally. There's I don't know if you're probably familiar with the U.S. sentencing guidelines. Or
not particularly, because I wasn't federal.
Okay.
So I didn't do anything federal. I only turned a couple of cases over federally just a couple times, but I wasn't heavily involved in the federal side.
Gotcha. So the mandatory minimums after a case called Booker are no longer mandatory, as long as the judge needs to be able to have an articulable reason for why they make an upward or downward departure. And that can be their role in the offense. Did they cooperate with police?
Okay.
What was the weight of the drugs involved? What kind of drug was it? What's their prior criminal history? And then they also have to analyze factors like danger to the community, that kind of stuff. So in most of these cases, kind of a long way to answer your question, it's mostly either conspiracy for possession with intent to distribute, or if they have a possession, it's also tacked on with like you said, like a RICO.
Gotcha.
Or a continuing criminal enterprise, or even the people with the sentences that who do have that it just seems more of like a simple possession case, they get habitual offender.
Oh, because when they were 20 years old, they stole a Kit Kat bar from a store or whatever the case is.
Right.
Gotcha.
And actually, all of our constituents are non-violent.
Okay.
No history of any violent convictions or sexual offenses.
Okay.
And no other drugs involved in the underlying offense. So if they get caught for like marijuana and cocaine at this time, we're currently not taking on those cases.
Okay.
We're just doing primarily cannabis and not including synthetic cannabis either.
Oh, okay. No spice or K2.
No,
or any
I
of that
actually
stuff.
was reading that's like pretty dangerous.
So
The spice and all that.
Some of the worst instances of dealing with people when I was in law enforcement, it was when they were on spice. The most violent. This was not a smoke a little weed, get a little mellow, and go chill on their couch. These were people that were out of their freaking minds. That it took a lot to get these people under control. It wasn't just a simple, no, it was not nearly the same as cannabis.
Isn't that so ironic? I was going to say funny, but it's not really funny. It's sad that the legal alternative, or they might have made it illegal, I think, but it was legal when I was in college.
Right.
That was the thing that athletes would do.
Oh, really?
Because they couldn't test for it back then. And all these athletes, like I knew a lot of like divers who would just smoke spice, like K2, and I didn't know them to get violent, but I mean, I do know someone who like had a seizure from it, and I do know like it would make them really sick and freak out. And then the one that's illegal that they say is dangerous, reefer madness, is actually 0 deaths ever reported. No violence connected.
That's one of the things that I always make up, or I always bring a point to the fact that even the Drug Enforcement Administration themselves, in their book of drugs, their book of drugs, published online, and go to DEA.gov and look it up, and look up cannabis, and it shows, the hash and hash oil and this or that. It says right across one of their things is no deaths have been reported at this time, strictly from ingestion alone. Obviously, there's been morons who have gotten high and then done stupid stuff, which has led to their death. But from ingestion alone and using cannabis alone, there's been no reported deaths ever.
Isn't that wild? It's so wild. Have you ever talked with any of your guests on here about like the history behind how cannabis became illegal or anything like that?
No, I've only read documentaries, or heard documentaries, and one of them that's on Netflix was a fantastic one. So no, I have not. So that would be interesting to cover.
What was the one on Netflix?
I believe it was called The Grass is Greener. It had a Fab Five Freddy on it, which, correct me if I'm wrong, I think he's an ambassador for Last Prisoner Project.
I think he might. We have so many ambassadors.
I know. I was looking at that. Jim Belushi.
I wrote some of them down. Tommy Chung, Melissa Etheridge, Damien and Stephen Marley, Master P, Montel Williams, Slightly Stupid, Revolution.
There's a ton of them. I'm a huge Damian Marley fan too.
Yeah,
that's cool.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but I believe it was called The Grass is Greener. And it very much did take a look at cannabis from the Black American perspective, and the turning it making it scary for the white man that, see, my phone went off. I told you it's going to be something. It's my dumb ass that does it every time. But looking at it from, the black man's going to, smoke this reefer and then come and steal all the white women. Like that was legitimately concerns back in the 20s and 30s.
It's really crazy. So cannabis it's been used for 5,000 years. For medicinal therapeutic uses. And it was actually not until the 1910s, during the Mexican Revolution, Mexican immigrants started coming to the United States, and they brought cannabis with them. And they kind of, the government was associating it with these lower class working immigrants, and were saying these Mexicans are gonna, get. It said they're gonna give it. They said, actually, the majority of pot smokers are minorities, and quote, it has a negative effect on the degenerate races. They said degenerate races.
I'm not laughing because it's not funny. I'm laughing at the just ridiculousness of it.
Mexicans will distribute killer weed to unsuspecting school children. And this is really bad. Reefer makes darkies think they're as good as white men.
Who said that quote? Do you happen to know?
I do. Harry Anslinger.
Oh, well, Anslinger. Okay, there you go.
Yep. And this isn't a quote, but they did talk about what you mentioned, that smoking pot will ruin a white woman's virtue, and they'll start having sex with black men. I don't know where they're getting these crazy things. So, that was in 1930 when Anslinger came along for the U.S. Treasury Department's head of Bureau of Narcotics, and that's where those statements were made. And then you had your propaganda films, right. Reefer Madness. Drug dealers are going to invite your teenagers to jazz parties, and they're going to get them high and hooked on reefer and
listen to good music.
Yeah,
and eat some good food.
Exactly. And so he oversaw the passage of the Marijuana Tax Act of 1937.
Anslinger did.
Mm-hmm. And so it actually got overturned later for being unconstitutional, but it was quickly replaced with the Controlled Substances Act. And so the Schaefer Commission, so originally there was going to be, and there still is, I just hit the microphone. There's 5 schedules of drugs. Right. And they were supposed to, as a temporary placeholder, place marijuana in Schedule 1, which is the worst, which is no currently accepted medical use, not safe even under supervision of medical personnel, doctors, high potential for abuse, and there's another one. Lack of accepted safety under medical supervision. And they're trying to say no accepted medical use, which is kind of laughable because even in as early as 1944, 1958, the ABA and American Bar Association, American Medical Association, and New York Academy for Medicine found that it shouldn't be in Schedule 1 and that it has medical uses that could definitely benefit a lot of people. And the Schaefer Commission, that when Nixon came on, actually came out with a report recommending that marijuana should not be in Schedule 1. And President Nixon just said, nope, it's staying in Schedule 1. And that's actually how it stayed, and that's where it is today.
So I'm not familiar. I'm familiar with the LaGuardia report that back in the 40s that said there's no reason that this should be illegal. It's not harming the black communities. It's not harming the inner city communities. It should be regulated like alcohol. Mm-hmm. Obviously, this is post-prohibition. I'm not familiar with the Schaefer Commission specifically. I've heard the name before, and I know that President Nixon was ultimately responsible for the war on drugs, starting it and wasting trillions of dollars by this time.
Yeah. So Schaefer Commission was just the commission that Nixon put together to figure out where marijuana should be scheduled.
Okay.
And it's crazy because his own commission said it shouldn't be Schedule 1. And he just was like, you know what? I'm not listening to that. It's like he just had this commission prepare this whole thing, have all this evidence, and he just kept it in Schedule 1.
He was expecting a different outcome, probably.
Yeah. And it's crazy because you know how marijuana is spelled sometimes with a J, sometimes with an H. Mm-hmm. The origins of that is that they changed the spelling to make it sound more Mexican.
Oh,
is
okay.
That's air quotes.
Interesting.
So they were trying. It has racist and xenophobic ties and why it's illegal. And then of course there's the money aspect.
Right.
So the Controlled Substances Act, the penalties grew harsher and harsher until about the 1970s when the white upper middle class students started being affected by the laws. Then they said, okay, that these are a little too harsh.
So we're into the hippie generation. Mm-hmm. We're in post Woodstock and all that stuff. And so now what was it called? What was it? 1974, somewhere along those lines, when some other distinctions in the war on drugs was made. I forget specifically. And then so now it's the college graduates that are now using and the academics that are now using weed.
Yes, and they're like, Cannabis. Oh, our sons and daughters, white upper middle class, are being affected. That's not okay. So they kind of took a step back. And then in the 80s, we have the whole Reagan just say no, Nancy Reagan, and the failure of the DARE program.
Right. Drugs are really expensive. That's what DARE should stand for.
I've never heard that.
Yeah, that's what it should. That's what it should be, as opposed to what is it? Drug abuse resistance education.
I was always surprised, like going through DARE, that I was like, that I always thought I was gonna grow up and people were gonna be like offering me free drugs all the time. And you know, I grew up and I was like, I guess that doesn't happen.
No, shit's expensive.
Yeah.
I go to a dispensary, I'm like, what just happened?
Right.
No, but seriously though, like the disparity in between, and again, I do think that I'm not one of these people that says, I mean, I had a career in law enforcement, and I can see the side of the house that says these laws are not racist, but that I can also see the side of the house that says, but they're rooted in racism. You know, take a look at the difference in, you know, well, if the black population uses it, well, we need to punish the hell out of them. Oh, but now the white middle class kids are using it, so we need to not punish them. It's the exact same thing that happened in the 80s with crack cocaine versus cocaine.
That's right where I was going next.
Okay.
And opium, when, you know, the Chinese immigrants came over, they also, I mean, opium's not really great, but it was definitely targeted for that specific reason. And so was marijuana, and so was crack. The crack laws were, that's when a lot of the disparities in sentencing in cocaine and crack, and it's crazy how if you just add a little whatever you add to crack. I'm not a crack expert.
I mean, either. That's one's above me.
So the penalties did soften once it started hitting white America, basically. And then it was the 3 strikes laws that 22 states and the federal government passed between 93 and 95. And then in 1996, California was the first state to legalize medical marijuana. And then from there, I think it's 21 states plus DC. It's recreationally legal now. Right. And 39 states medical. And Arizona was passed their medical just in 2010. And their recreational was Prop 207 in 2020.
That one just passed. So there's a op-ed in one of the newspapers recently that just dropped a couple days ago. I don't know if you saw it or not, but talking about the fallacy of medical marijuana in the state of Arizona. And I'm not very happy with the op-ed. So it's the sort of thing where I've told my story before, and I use mine for chronic pain and back pain from, you know, discs and all that. And this particular person who wrote this op-ed talked about, oh, you know, it's you can't tell me that the weed in dispensaries is going to treat this or that. And it's like, well, actually, if you sit down with these people, if you sit down and hear their stories and talk to them as human beings, you will understand that cannabis saves lives.
Was the author a doctor?
No, I don't believe so.
Didn't go to medical school?
I don't believe so.
And they're opining on its medical therapeutic benefits. Okay.
Yep.
Well, that's why it's called an op-ed, op for opinion, and you know what they say about opinions.
Right? So. You literally think the exact. I said that in our group text to my normal people. It was like, yeah, no, opinions are like, you know what opinions are like.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I said. And it's the sort of thing where as we move into the world that we're in now, where we're actually looking back 5,000 years saying it's been used for 5,000 years as medicine. It's been used from the Chinese culture, I believe is where they found it first. And here we are today in 2023, where I went from busting cannabis users to not touching it to now using it for my back pain and now advocating for it in a very, very condensed period of time. Yet I'm sitting across from you who works for an organization that's trying to get people out of prison for using the same thing that I have sitting in this room that I'm well within my rights and within the laws. And I just don't understand where we go from here and how do we get these people out of prison, again, specifically for just having cannabis.
Right.
And just, I don't know. I don't get it.
So most of the, like we discussed, federal cases are, so Biden's announcement of he's going to pardon the simple possession. I mean, nobody's really sitting in prison for just simple possession without any other charges tacked on. But actually, we do have a fair amount of state constituents that are in prison for just marijuana. I mean, one of the biggest cases, like my first big case that I ever worked on was Richard DeLisi down in Florida.
Okay.
He was sentenced to 90 years for, wait for this, conspiracy to possess marijuana with intent to distribute.
He didn't possess it.
He didn't possess it. They found his thumb on a map. And we're like, oh, this map was used in connection. And he did 32 years. He got out in 2020. And I think it was December 2020.
Just weed. Just cannabis.
Yep.
That's insane to me.
Mm-hmm. And 32 years he got out. I think he was 71 or 72 years old. Great guy. Love him to death.
That's terrible.
It is really terrible. But he's living his life now. And we're so glad that I'm so glad to even know him.
No.
He's really, his whole attitude, everything's inspirational. And we have 111 constituents that are our constituents that have been released.
Okay.
That are just for marijuana.
Meaning that the Last Prisoner Project has had a hand and a role in getting those 111 released specifically.
So sometimes that means direct legal involvement, and then sometimes that means we helped facilitate the release through advocacy efforts or our campaigns and stuff. So
contacting governors for clemency type stuff.
So I have the number here because I knew I was going to forget. We've matched all time 110 constituents with pro bono attorneys.
Nice.
And about 50 of those have resulted in filings, whether it's clemency, compassionate release, resentencing, whatnot. Some of them were either they got clemency from Trump or they got parole early. That often happens, that kind of thing. But going back to what you were saying about the amount of money that's being spent. So $47 billion are spent annually on the war on drugs. And the legal marijuana industry, at least for the U.S. sales, was $10.4 billion.
We're spending $47 billion and making $10 billion.
It's really crazy. And 15.7 million Americans have been arrested in the last 2 decades for marijuana alone. If someone's arrested for marijuana every 90 seconds, there's more people.
Still?
Yep. There's more people in prison for marijuana and arrested for marijuana than all nonviolent crimes combined. And going back to your point, a person of color, particularly Black people, are more likely to be arrested. And I think I read a study was people of color are 4 times more likely to be arrested for marijuana despite similar usage rates among their white counterparts. This
isn't always an interesting topic and an interesting. I don't know how to bridge this gap because I worked for the state of Arizona and I had an assigned area and I could go literally wherever I wanted within that assigned area. Obviously I can go anywhere else, but so these are conversations that I don't know how to have with people. And I think you're the perfect one. So would you agree or disagree that its usage is very much cultural? Would you agree that the Black community is much more accepting of using it and has been for a lot longer?
No. So we've actually been like the usage rates are extremely similar among Black and white Americans. And actually it was even in the 1800s sold in the stores, but they just didn't, they called it something else.
Well, and they couldn't sell
cocaine and stuff.
Right.
You know?
It's a wonder elixir. Just try this. Okay, so that's interesting. So this is the part that I don't know how to. I don't know how to fix this. I don't know how I pull over a car and it's a white guy. He has personal possession on him and he gets arrested. I pull over a car. It's a Hispanic person and they have it on him. They get arrested. And I pull over a car. It's a black person. They have it on him and they get arrested. Is it, why are the minorities prosecuted more? Because this is something also, it irks me just a little bit. Like, it's not just the cops that are doing that. There's the rest of the criminal justice system. There's the prosecutors, there's the defense side, there's the judges, there's all the Department of Corrections.
That's right.
It's not just the cops cops have nothing to do with it. They just gather the evidence and send it on up to a lawyer.
Right. Well, they make the arrest. But.
Correct. They don't suggest charges. They just gather the facts. This is what happened, make the arrest, and then submit the report and on down the line to the prosecutor that it goes to, or district attorney, prosecutor. We call them prosecutors here in Arizona. So that's my question though, is why is the other communities other than the white communities prosecuted more? Why are they jailed more? Why?
Well, this is going to be my opinion that is based on research.
Okay.
But I think that at least as far as prosecutors go, that the war on drugs and that whole like idea and that the power behind that and this notion, like the whole war on drugs created this environment where people of color were kind of villainized.
Agreed.
And when it came to prosecuting, people want to appear tough on crime for like if they get elected or something
Agreed.
like that. And now it's kind of trending away from that, thankfully. But I mean, even still here in Arizona, there is very much still a little bit of a tough on crime attitude, which I'm okay with tough on crime. But
Right.
if it's the right kind of crime, violent crime. Yeah, actual crime.
Actual crime.
Yeah, I'm cool with that.
Right.
But at the same time, there's also the level that you're talking about. There's so many levels to it. There's prosecutorial discretion. There's police, and police do, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, they do decide what to charge. Like, I'm going to charge you with obstruction of justice or whatever, like when they write the complaint.
So the way that I can say it is I always looked at it from just a fact-finding mission. Okay, I cars doing 90 and a 65, pull over car for speeding, walk up to car, smell cannabis, make arrest for cannabis. So it is 100% the officer's discretion as to what to charge. So it's also just fact-finding and evidence gathering to give to the prosecutor, because the prosecutor can always decide, no, I don't want to do those charges, whatever the case may be. And this is something that I do think that law enforcement, the best tool that law enforcement has is discretion. If we start taking away discretion from law enforcement officers, it's going to be black and white. It's going to be, you had this, you're charged this, that's it, period, with no discretion. Whereas some things can be just let it slide by. Like I had Deputy Slope who came and talked to me about, this or that, and he talked about suspended licenses. Well, if it's black and white, if you have a suspended license, you're going to jail. Where if an officer has discretion, they can just send you on down the road. You know what I mean? So it's these sort of things. So it's just an evidence gathering thing to send to the prosecutor.
So I think it's also not just a race problem. I think it's also a class problem.
I agree.
I think no matter if you're black, white, Mexican, here in Arizona, Latino,
Right.
If you are part of a lower socioeconomic status, you have less resources to hire a good attorney, unfortunately. And public defenders, I'm not even talking down on them, because public defenders went to law school like the rest of us, and they're officers of the court, and they're really, most of them are doing the best they can. But the caseload is too much.
Agreed.
They don't have the resources. The caseload's too much. They don't have the time that if you have money to hire a legal defense or post-conviction relief to specialize and, get evidence, get experts, that's money. And so essentially people are paying for, at least not paying for the outcome, but paying to increase their chance of a certain outcome, that people of lower socioeconomic status, regardless of race, but it obviously particularly affects black people and people of color more, they don't have the ability, and also they don't have to hire that legal counsel. And sometimes they grew up, like you were saying, and they have priors from when they were growing up, even if it's juvenile or as an adult, like small time things, not having money. And it's like a lot of people, you're like, how did you get into selling drugs? And they're like, I just wanted to support my kid. I'm a single father, whatever it may be. And those are problems that obviously if you're of a higher socioeconomic status, that you're not going to run into as many of those problems. You're more likely to get hired. You're like there's so many, it's such a big topic. The communities, the way that, it's, I don't know, what's the word? Gerrymandering.
The redlining?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like the way that people of color got like forced into urban areas, like all of these things factor into what kind of education they get, what kind of opportunities they have, and it affects the decisions they make. And when they don't have, a lot of these lower socioeconomic status families don't have the same kind of family support that you would see, because a lot of people of color, Black fathers are in prison.
Right.
And also it's partially the way, the kind of, sorry, I'm trying to think of the word, but it's the support that you get. And when you're trying to argue before a judge, you can have letters of support or people saying, oh, I'm going to help this person.
Right.
And those kind of make it less likely for you to reoffend. But you're more likely to reoffend if you have a lower socioeconomic status and you're put back in that position again, especially when you get out of prison.
Yeah, you're going right back to where you did those things.
And then the judge is going to look at the guidelines, but they can make their own decision, and they're going to factor in these past charges, which they shouldn't have even gotten convictions for cannabis, because the United States government is now making money off of the sales.
Oh, we can't talk about that.
Yeah.
I mean, come on now.
And
we can't talk about the tax base and how much money they're getting. Come on now.
It's really crazy. So basically it's like there's so many levels. There's the judge, prosecutor, and then actually when they're in prison and they finally get out, it's the recidivism rates are higher based on their socioeconomic status and what they're returning to. And that's why our reentry program is so important, because we give them resources for even people don't even think about like transportation to get to work, things like that, medical needs, dependence.
Yeah.
And the terrible thing is that not only are these people being affected, but the whole family structure and community is being affected.
Assuming that they have a family.
Yeah.
It was a few years ago, and I forget, it was on one of the local Facebook pages. A gentleman put up, I run a halfway house. This was right during the COVID lockdowns and all that good stuff. He goes, I run a halfway house. My guys were hungry. My guys can't get work because they can't go to the DMV and get a freaking driver's license. So I loaded up some food and took my kids to show them, and went and talked to these guys for just a moment, brought them some food. I'm like, if the only thing keeping you from reoffending is some food, I'll run out and get you some freaking food. But he was telling me like one of the obstacles was just going and getting a driver's license. Just going and getting a state ID. I'm like, why isn't that on the path to, why isn't there a DMV office sitting at the exit of a freaking prison system and giving you your state issued ID? Like, I don't understand why we're not doing very basic things to allow people to re-enter and to come back into society.
Because the prison industrial complex has no interest.
Zero.
In having people they want people to come back, so because that's more money they can make, and that's jobs. And then we also have the big pharma aspect of it.
Not a fan of big pharma.
The two biggest opponents, lobbyists against marijuana legalization are departments of correction workers, private prisons, and big pharma. And that kind of goes to show, like, you know what I mean? Like the fact that they're lobbying for their own jobs.
Yep.
And it's just really crazy to think that, like you said, that so many people don't have the reentry resources. And I mean, we have so many constituents. I mean, the vast majority of our constituents are males. We have a handful of females, but a lot of them are fathers. And a lot of them are like, I just want to go home and be able to raise my kid and watch them play football, be able to support them. And that's the most heartbreaking thing that I see, is that these fathers are away from their families, significant others, and their kids are, you know, growing up seeing their father behind glass. And it's just really heartbreaking. And we have constituents, like I mentioned, Richard DeLisi. I mean, when he got out, his son was in his 40s, who I met. And his daughter had been in a serious car accident and she's permanently injured. And then he had another son who unfortunately passed away. And he just was in prison this entire time. And
you said 32 years?
It was either 31 or 32.
That's an insane amount of time for cannabis, and especially to not see your kids for a low-level offense, a nonviolent offense.
Yeah, it's so outrageous. And it's like, so there's so many purposes behind incarceration, and it's incapacitation, but one of them is rehabilitation.
Right. I agree with you.
Okay.
It should be. That should be priority.
Right. And it's kind of like we're not really doing much to help them rehabilitate themselves. I mean, it's really crazy. Like, people go in and they don't come out the same.
No.
And just picturing that you're in there and you're languishing in prison, sitting there in years, while people doing the exact same thing are selling cannabis and creating intergenerational wealth, is just such a travesty of justice. It's really
a kick in the pants right there. That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And I don't like, so for those people that are still serving those sentences, but because it's federal, they can't get out. They can't. Is there any sort of, are you guys seeing any sort of reform on the federal? I have said that it's funny that you said Big Pharma. I follow a couple of different cannabis advocates. One of them is the Pot Brothers at Law out of California. I love those dudes. They were talking about all these different laws that are being created in California. And I've stated, and I've posted them much time, until Big Pharma is out of the picture, cannabis is never going to be legalized in the country. That's my personal opinion. I hope I'm wrong. I want to be wrong. I want to be proven wrong on that. But when you can take a pill that fixes the issue, but then causes all these other side effects that you have to take more pills for, why would Big Pharma want to stop that money flow when you can, use cannabis and turn around your life and not be a slave to freaking pills?
It's so crazy, especially when you look at the death rates among drugs, for prescription drugs versus marijuana, which is zero.
Zero. Say that again for the people in the back.
Zero.
It's zero.
Yeah. So it's really frustrating. And I also, I'm hoping that you're going to be wrong. I think that we're going to get them out. But I mean, so they can get released federally under the First Step Act, which is compassionate release.
Okay.
And you can qualify for compassionate release for a variety of reasons. During COVID, there's no cases of them just saying, oh, you're a risk. COVID's a risk to you for being in prison, because then they just let everyone out. Basically.
Right.
So it has to be like a health condition also. Okay. So we've seen people get out who they are male, have some kind of heart issue, they have asthma. I mean, Tekashi 6ix9ine, the rapper, I think Daniel Hernandez is his real name. He was supposed to do a long time, and he was in, I think, Southern Northern District in New York, and he actually ended up getting released under the First Step Act because he had asthma.
Okay.
And he's in his 20s.
He's a young kid.
Yeah, and then we have constituents who've had compassionate release get denied, even though, so one of our constituents, he was incarcerated here in Arizona, but he was federal.
Okay.
His name was, I hope I'm saying this right, Horacio Estrada Elias.
Okay.
I think that's how you say it. But he got out after he got compassionate release denied, even though he had major health problems. So he didn't get out till he was in his 90s, which we got compassionate release granted to him I think in 2021.
Is there any sort of education that's being given on the federal side of the house regarding cannabis and what its effects are, or are we still just stuck in the 1930s as far as you're aware? Is there
like education to who?
Anywhere? You know what I mean? Because I can tell you right now, like law enforcement on the state side, from the people that I've spoken to, they're still not getting, they're getting updates on how to deal with the laws. When you go to the more advanced programs, they're learning about some of the things, the endocannabinoid system and all that type of stuff. But your regular officers not getting any kind of education in the fact of the benefits or anything like that. It's just still the status quo. And the younger generation is obviously more accepting of cannabis, but I just can't see like these lawmakers and everybody getting any sort of education and still being this firm on their stances. So
to their credit, I will say the U.S. Sentencing Commission does conduct studies.
Okay.
And there have been studies on recidivism rates based on low-level drug crimes that include marijuana. And there have been medical reports considered and rescheduling or descheduling marijuana as a Schedule I under the Controlled Substances Act. So there is talks. There's talks, and there's also a directive to stop arresting and prosecuting for marijuana crimes. The problem is the other offenses that they tie it into.
Understood.
And as long as they can still tie in those things, and as long as it remains federally illegal, people that are doing something, we have constituents who, Rudy Gamo, who is a Michigan constituent, he was operating a dispensary in Michigan where it's legal, and he got, I think, 8 years because basically he didn't meet some of the like qualifications that you have to have, like the procedural things that they require. Because the law, back when he was doing it, the laws weren't clear, and basically the things he was doing now would have been legal, and it's really crazy. Thankfully he just got his parole approved to be released in July. But it's crazy to think that, there was one guy who, he was a vet and he had PTSD, and he smoked marijuana for his PTSD. And I think he also had some injuries, and he had his medical marijuana with him, crossed state lines. I think he was in Kansas. I could be wrong.
I'm familiar with this case. I believe I am. It's an older black gentleman that...
Sean Worsley. Yeah. So really, really crazy. I know I keep saying that, but it really is crazy.
No, it is.
It actually is. But yeah, it's out of control. And then, I was going to say the other avenue for federal release is clemency, which that's basically doesn't exist as an avenue. I mean, it does, but clemency can just sit so that you can file a clemency application, and there is petition, and there's no time limit that they have to decide on it. They can just put it on the desk of the next politician who comes in, or they can just deny it. And it's like, that's it. That's the decision.
And there's nowhere else to go after that.
After that, you could reapply for compassionate release, or you could try to overturn your sentence on other grounds, or try to get resentencing. But that's why the law side of it and the policy making is so important to provide not just avenues for relief to fix the mistake that we already made by putting them in there in the first place, but on the intervention side with police. And that's why it's so great to talk to you and see that you're trying to bridge the gap between, law enforcement and, I'm not going to say the law enforcement and everybody else, but
it's law enforcement and everybody else.
Kind of.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah. And the people who still think that people should be in prison for marijuana, it's like, if somebody has an articulable argument that they would like to share with me, I'd love to hear it, because I haven't heard one yet.
Well, and the thing is, though, is it's like, I do believe, this is all personal things that I'm saying here, there are people who say, you can't be under the influence of cannabis. What's the word I'm looking for? Intoxicated. Can't be intoxicated under cannabis and all this good stuff. And I will argue like 100% you can. I've been a cannabis user for four years now. And there are times, and I had the conversation with Deputy Slope about, there are times where I can smoke half a joint and I'm not. But then there's other times where I absolutely am. And there's a time and a place where we need to treat it as, if I was prescribed Xanax, and I took one Xanax and that's the prescription, you're not intoxicated. You take 2 or 3 because you like the effect, you're now intoxicated. It's the exact same effect. Now, obviously, the first time you take something, you're going to be a little discombobulated a little bit. But we need to come to a point, the science needs to catch up. It's not, like that op-ed said, it's not a matter of it isn't medical marijuana. It needs to be studied as medicine. It needs to be looked at and regarded as medicine, where we can take a look at those sorts of things and then come up with good studies to show the public that it is in fact.
Well, there are tons of great medical literature and studies on marijuana and actually on hallucinogens.
That's up and coming too.
Mushrooms.
Yes.
But the problem is we're not listening to it.
Agreed. And right now, I don't know if you've noticed this or not, but this is just strictly from an outside view, just kind of looking at, social media. There seems to be a jump from finding people the healthcare that they need to now we're going to go straight to psychedelics. There appears to be this gap in the thought of cannabis as being used for mental health, as for being used for several things. Everybody's just kind of made the switch over to psychedelics. And I've seen Congressman Crenshaw and even AOC. I know that they were working together, but there's like a missing part of it. That's like, wait a minute, time out. There's still relevant uses for cannabis in mental health, for PTSD, for all sorts
You're like,
of other.
Let's go back, rewind.
Right,
let's go back to the cannabis.
Right.
If that don't work, then maybe let's try the mushrooms.
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
It just seems as though that everybody's kind of forgotten about that for the mental health aspects of it. And I'm here to say, like, I again, all of my stories are personal and anecdotal. I did not realize that I had ADHD until I was diagnosed at 35 years old. And then when I started using cannabis after that, I'm like, well, holy shit, I can actually think and process stuff when I'm, not going a million miles an hour in my brain.
Right.
But that's the sort of thing is that we need to get to a place where it's looked at by doctors. But who is funding the doctors? Pharmaceutical companies. Who's sending them on their, 7-week or 7-day vacations in all golf tournaments and all that? The pharmaceutical companies. So they're not even going to be allowed to edge in there and get their word in. They're also scared of the DEA. So they're going to lose their medical license if they prescribe anything as opposed to just recommend.
Right. And there are like universities do a good job at doing the studies behind the marijuana. And I'm not sure kind of how the research aspect of it works with actual doctors that are funded by the pharmaceutical companies. But there's definitely a conflict of interest in multiple parts here. Multiple parts, from the prosecutor wanting to get reelected or, or elected judges wanting to be tough on crime. Yep. And, who isn't in law enforcement, like the sheriff or somebody gets elected?
The sheriff departments do get elected. That is correct.
Do you find those people tend to be more like they try to get elected on a tough on crime platform in Arizona?
So yes and no. But at the same time, now I'm going to use my sheriff. I'm going to mention again, Mark Lamb. We're going to sit down one of these days, I promise you. Like Sheriff Lamb is of, for, and by the people, which I believe that in government. When I'm doing the Arizona Normal thing and I'm trying to get people interested, I'm like going, look, you can sit in your house and smoke now and have your card in this or that, but if you don't get involved and start telling these representatives what it is that you want, they're going to do their own thing. So I know from a personal aspect of Sheriff Mark Lamb, he's of, for, and by the people. The people have said that this is a legal substance, so therefore they're going to treat it legally. And he's got a huge social media presence. He's never once that I'm aware of ever been anti-cannabis or anything like that. He's anti-DUI. I'm anti-DUI. I don't want anybody driving under the influence of any substance.
And they're actually developing a breathalyzer for cannabis.
That scares me.
It's in the works.
Yeah, that scares me. I'm not a big fan of the research that I've been reading regarding that.
I need to get up to date on that, but I did see, because I was wondering how that would work.
I don't know. I don't really understand. And again, we don't have a per se law here, luckily, regarding THC limits. So you do have a per se law regarding alcohol, but there's been so much research on alcohol.
Oh, yeah.
Like people, the science community and the law enforcement community agree that if you're at a 0.08 or above in alcohol limit, you're drunk. They agree on that. The science agrees, lawyers agree, everybody agrees. But on the cannabis side of the house, nobody freaking knows.
Yeah.
What's 100 nanograms? What's 2? What's 5? What's 10? Nobody knows. Nobody has any clue what kind of, intoxication that person is.
And it's interesting you bring up alcohol because when you compare the amount of deaths that have occurred, I mean, I don't drink at all. And the negative effects that it has on people's lives. I mean, I'm not like president of the Temperance Society or anything like that, but I'm just saying, if you look at something that's legal, and I'm not aware of any therapeutic use of alcohol unless you're drowning your sorrows.
And then it's compounding them and making them worse.
Right. And then looking at the risk for dependence, physical, psychological, looking at the potential for abuse, huge potential for abuse, looking at the number of deaths, the harm that it's caused, and seeing that anyone over the age of 21 can go and just buy it.
As much as you want.
And but cannabis, they're like, no, our kid, we don't want it to be legal. What if the kids get a hold of it? What if the kids get a hold of the alcohol? Would we just forget about that?
I grew up in a day and age up in Northeast Mesa when it was still all freaking orange groves out there, where we would go out and party and drink and get pass out drunk and on a regular basis, and we're damaging ourselves but again, anybody over the age of 21 can do that. But and again, the cirrhosis of the liver and the downward spiral in your job and lack of performance and all that type of stuff, cannabis doesn't do those things. Yeah. I think the argument, this is a personal statement, people say, weed makes you lazy, this or that. I do think that those types of personalities, the lazy type personality, whatever the case may be, they're going to use any substance. It doesn't matter if it's alcohol. It doesn't matter if it's weed. It doesn't matter. Those are just the non-ambitious, non-driven type people that are going to find an escape in no matter what it is.
Right. Making something illegal doesn't make it not used and abused.
Right.
And creating this black market for cannabis in states where it's illegal, it's like the fact that the drug cartels are liking that is outrageous. Yep. And the big pharma companies just look at the opioid epidemic.
Created by the freaking pharmaceutical companies.
Right. Just because you make something illegal doesn't mean it's not going to exist. There will always be crime. There will always be drugs. There will always be people illegally using drugs.
Amen.
Should we create, the choice is actually between a black market and a regulated, legalized market.
Amen.
Which one's safer? I mean, it's common sense.
If it's 1930 and you're in the Reefer Madness era, it's not the cannabis.
Goodness. You might be going to jazz parties and having sex with black men. Woo. Out of control.
And I just don't comprehend how they're just continuing to perpetuate the war on drugs by allowing some states to legalize it, other states don't, and it's just you're creating criminals. And the drug cartels are more powerful than ever. Just like you said, there's going to be a black market. There's still to this day a black market for cigarettes.
Yeah.
For alcohol.
There's a black market for human beings.
Oh yeah, that's huge. I'm very anti-human smuggling. That's one of the things I did in law enforcement. There's a black market for, but I mean, legal substances. There's a black market for all this stuff in this country now.
It's crazy that most people are in jail or prison for, possessing a substance that alters your consciousness. But there's more people in prison for that than for the rapists and the drug smugglers. And I know this is cliche, but you could get a manslaughter charge and get out in 6 years. 7 years. Yeah.
First time offense. Yeah.
I mean, I know people that have, gotten in car accident or, they've killed someone, or I know people have been killed in alcohol related OVI accidents, and they're not serving 30 years.
No.
Like Richard Lacey, 32 years. So it's just not, the way that we're doing things is not working.
No.
It's working for the prisons.
Yep.
It's working for, and the argument is like, okay, first of all, the state and federal taxes that could be produced if we were to legalize it, and more people being out of prison, generating more revenue. And the last thing is 1.1 million jobs could be created just by 2025 if it became federally legal right now.
Yeah, you'd have the growers, I mean, and it breaks down into other things too. Growers know how to grow plants, which in turn you can grow food. You know, your dispensaries, they know sales and business and entrepreneurship, which will lead to other things and creating a bigger economy, a larger economy. And I just wanted to say one of the things though too is that I do believe that having these men locked up in prison and not being but not being able to be a father to their kids, I think has a huge impact in what's happening in society. And then obviously the mothers as well, 100%. And not having your parental role model in your house for a simple possession charge or, you know, sales or anything like that, that is leading to a degradation in society.
We have a constituent in Florida, Juanita Maria Kinsey, who gave birth while incarcerated. She was shackled by her hands and feet. I mean, when I heard that, I really did cry. While giving
birth.
And then they take the baby. And it really, I'm getting goosebumps. I might cry. Like, it makes me so, that's just terrible to me. So terrible.
The other thing that I always take a look at is that, suppose you're one of those prison guards, you're one of those nurses, you're one of those whatever. Like, there's a human component to all of these people. No matter, look, I'm not going to talk about pedophiles. There's no human component to that in any way, shape, or form. Like those are not humans. But I'm talking, you know, you're people who just made bad decisions.
And those people should be incapacitated. That's
agreed.
That's part of the reason of prison. But I'll let you continue. But should a marijuana, they need to be incapacitated because they smoked a little reefer? Come on.
Not in any way, shape, or form.
Go ahead. Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, don't. That's fine. But it's one of these things where it's like, I just don't understand it, even low-level crimes. Like my thought process on crime has definitely changed, especially drugs, especially what I've seen on being on the outside. I say outside, but like no longer being in law enforcement, because you get fed so much propaganda as a police officer. You get fed so much government this and government that, and it's all anti. So even alcohol, anti-alcohol, but every cop drinks. Every cop drinks, you know, till they're numb in every single weekend. But I don't comprehend locking people up and not treating them just as humans, just as basic human beings. I don't know what I would do in a situation like that where somebody came in as a low-level offender and is shackled. Like, I'm hoping that I would have enough fortitude to be like, can we take these damn things off and let the person have a human experience?
The state prisons are way worse than the federal prisons. I mean, it's prison, so it's not. But if you look at other countries, it's really crazy. Now, I don't know. I'm not going to opine on whether it should be that nice. Like, I look at like Sweden or something. I'm like, I want to go there. But,
right. If I'm going to commit a crime, it's going to be there.
Right, yeah. But it's really crazy that a lot of these state facilities, first of all, their primary response to COVID has been solitary confinement, which has been studied and proven to psychologically damage and affect people. We're bringing people into prison, damaging them, and making them arguably more dangerous by putting them in prison. Not all people. Like, some people are, you know, I don't think if someone goes to prison for cannabis, they're going to come out more dangerous. But some people are going to, you know, it just depends on the person. They're going to go in and it's like a crime network, or they're going to go to prison. You're not going to make it out alive. There's a lot of violence in prison. There's a lot of sexual assault in prison. They don't get the health and medical benefits that they need. They don't have the resources in the prisons to provide basic necessities. They can't have hand sanitizer because they're going to, they might drink it and get drunk. They are like, oh, you're sick? Okay, we're going to just put you in the hole for a week and 2 weeks, whatever, and you're not going to have any contact with your family, not tell your family where you are. Like, that's a human rights violation to me. Some of these, if you look at some of these prisons and how just dirty, disgusting they look, And we have so many constituents who get out and have so many health problems, dental problems.
Oh, I'm sure.
And Richard Lacey came out and he has gotten significantly healthier. It's crazy. He's just been like this. The food they're feeding them, terrible nutritional value. I never
really thought about that before.
Yeah, terrible. Like they, when they finally do go to the doctors are like, what prison does to your body, especially for long-term sentences, is really despicable. It's really despicable. And if you look at even these corrections officers are smuggling drugs into the prison.
Yeah. It's
kind of like, what are we doing here? What's going on? And there's some people you do have to incapacitate.
Yeah, I agree.
Because, there are some people who are incapable of rehabilitation.
I agree.
But I'd say that the vast majority, if we actually took measures to try to rehabilitate people, could be rehabilitated. I don't think someone who gets arrested for marijuana is like irredeemable. And I
think 99% of most people in prison are redeemable.
Yeah.
We can teach them job skills. We can teach them healthy coping skills. I mean, I'm in my 40s and I still have unhealthy coping skills that I deal with. Like, you know what I mean? Like, we're all a screwed up mess in some way, shape, or form. On the outside, though, we have a little bit of an idea on how to get that help. But when you're stuck in prison, what are you going to do?
And the mental illness component.
Oh,
We've
it's
criminalized
huge.
Mental illness. We've criminalized it. And we've criminalized, if you think about what you're actually criminalizing when it comes to cannabis, it's just that you're experimenting with your own consciousness. That's illegal for some reason.
Again,
and not just that, but the argument is what you could do.
Right.
Well, you could do this. You're getting punished for something you haven't even done yet. You could have hit someone with a car. Well, I didn't.
Right.
You could have this, that. You could have killed someone. Well, I didn't. You could have done this, could have done that. It's like you're punishing someone for something that hasn't even happened yet. And then alternatively, you're punishing them for experimenting with their own consciousness, which the government really shouldn't have a role in.
And that is exactly how my thought process, now no longer in law enforcement, has changed. I have only used cannabis. I've never used anything else, but I can tell you right now that I have been exposed to people who are very educated, high level thinkers and problem solvers that use a myriad of drugs, of mind-altering substances, and are some of the smartest people I know. Not going to name any names, not going to name any substances or anything like that. But at the same time, and then there's also people who I know who have had horrific bouts of PTSD. I know several military veterans who have been, I was never deployed. I never went overseas. I was military. I never did anything like that. Don't have any of those experiences.
You were 3 years, I think you said, or 4?
I did 4. Yeah, I did my 4 years, got out, became a police officer here. So I never deployed, never went overseas, but I have buddies who have, and they said that they were like, standing on the ledge of, metaphorically speaking here, of suicide. And the only thing that has saved their life is the fact that they found psilocybin mushrooms. And now they have a reason to live. Now they have, and this is more than one person. This is multiple people that I know that are using this therapeutically, that have changed their lives and who they are, and are a fantastic human being now. And exactly what you just said. What you just said, though, it's not looked at in that way. It's not looked at as altering your own consciousness. It's seen as a societal thing. It's not seen as, well, this is my mind and my brain and I can do with it what I want. No. I also will say this, that I think there's a correlation between using these substances and a distrust for the government.
Oh, yeah, because when you look at it and someone is telling you, you can't do this, it's kind of like if you grew up with overprotective parents and they're like, you can't do that or you're going to die, or Mean Girls. You know, if you have sex before you're married, you'll get AIDS and die. And it's kind of like when someone's telling you over and over that something's dangerous and harmful and you see that it's not, how can you trust anything?
Right. You're going to have a distrust.
Your risk perception is thrown off. It's like when the person goes to college and they're like their parents had told them that everything was dangerous.
Right.
And they make terrible decisions. Not everyone, but just an example. They make terrible decisions because they don't know what's actually risky, what's not risky. When someone, you don't, the trust for that authority to be there. And when you don't judge things to be fair or consistent in the way that your government's operating, clear, consistent, transparent, and fair, then you're going to look at it as illegitimate.
Amen.
And you're not going to want to follow it. And it just continues to perpetuate these societal problems.
The harder government pushes that says, trust us, trust us, trust us, the more I'm standing there saying, no.
Meanwhile, they're drugging private citizens with LSD.
Right. Right.
Not recently. That was in the 70s, I think.
That's a thing.
But was that the 70s?
Operation MK Ultra.
Yep.
Like it was
Wormwood.
The 70s. Yeah.
Love that documentary.
It's just, but
yeah,
those sorts of things are happening in this day and age. These sorts of things, the more the government says, trust us, trust us, trust us, it's like the more people are like going, no, look at all the, take for instance, I'm going to go back to this op-ed again where the person's talking about, that really pissed me off in case you didn't notice. This person's talking about, oh, you know, the FDA does this or that. Well, actually, the FDA doesn't test a freaking drug. They have a very, very tiny little component. They take the data from the drug manufacturer and scan the data and then make their ruling based upon that. How many drugs have been recalled because the FDA, the government said, trust us, we're good, it's good. How many drugs have been recalled? Thousands upon thousands. I did the research on this, have been recalled because the government said, trust us. But then next thing you know, people are dying or having horrific neurological effects or whatever the case is.
Right. And that being said, I do think that obviously there's a lot of room for improvement in all different facets of government. But I do think that in more recent times where it's trending away from criminalization and the tough on crime thing, and we kind of realized as a society how harmful these ideas were to people of color, low socioeconomic status, to family structures. As it's trending away from that, you have seen more, of society coming together in states and legalizing things. Or in Arizona, it was actually a voter initiative referendum that got marijuana legalized. So, little steps are being made here and there, but there's more to be done, obviously.
Oh, there's so much more to be
done. President Biden saying, what was that, November, said, no person should be in prison for simple possession. But there needs to be more.
Right.
Because nobody's sitting in federal prison for just simple possession.
Right.
And it's kind of like there needs to be those steps taken on. We need to offer more reentry support while they're in prison. We need to offer more rehabilitative services. We need to instead of putting money into hunting down people who use weed and throwing them in prison and running the prisons, why don't we put it into making them, rehabilitating them? And why don't we put that into creating, that energy into actually going after real crime?
I agree. How do you make this happen? Like my personal opinion is like a prison should be a paramilitary style boot camp where you wake up, you do PT, and then you go to job training, and then in the evening, that's just my personal take on it, without doing a lot of thinking about it. But it should be a program to where you're taught discipline, you're taught skills, you're taught a job. I mean, look at all the thousands of trades that can be done by teaching these people how to build, fix, grow, whatever the case is. How do we emphasize the fact that is how we keep people out of prison? That is how we educate them. That is how we grow the economy and get fathers and mothers back in the homes with the kids. But the politicians are too busy spending money over here for their little pet projects. And I won't go that conspiracy theory way, but how do we convince them that this is the way? This is what we do. This is good for the economy. This is good for the family, the communities.
So there's two facets to that. First, only put people in prison that really need to be there. That's number one. So that, the money, time, resources can go to people that actually need it. Somebody smoking some weed probably doesn't need to be in prison getting rehabilitative services.
Right.
And then as far as actually providing these rehabilitative services and getting, people to realize that's the best thing. I guess it's just looking at recidivism research, just educating yourself. That's a lot of what Last Prisoner Project does is public education and awareness campaigns, not just listening to one news source.
Right. I don't listen to any of them anymore.
I read all different kinds of stuff. I listen to all different kinds of stuff. And there's some people who are like, I only listen to this.
Yeah, no.
And you have to avail yourself of everything. And then another thing is politicians need to actually follow through on their promises. And
Amen.
We need to stop electing people who aren't going to follow through on their promises.
Say that again, louder for the people in the back, because they just keep electing the same people for years and years and years.
And people who have the power to do things need to do them.
Yep.
You know, it's crazy. President Biden said that, you know, he pardoned simple marijuana possession. That's only federal.
Right.
And it's crazy because he, even in his statement, encouraged state governors to do the same. And only like a handful of them really did anything. And that's where our Pardons to Progress campaign that we're working on comes in right now. And it's writing letters and encouraging something that people can do to make people realize it and to change things, going to your question, to state governors and trying to put the pressure on them to follow through on what they have said that they're going to do, and to, you know, take the president's recommendation and, you know, pardon or people who have, you know, these governors who can grant clemency. It's kind of like, just do it.
Right.
If it's just just do it.
Stop
right?
talking about it and
Yeah.
just freaking do it. Yeah, I agree.
It's crazy. Like,
I agree.
And, you know, not to get political, but, you know, we had a recent president who was a celebrity, former celebrity, who pardoned quite a few, or granted clemency to quite a few of our constituents, marijuana offenders, right at the end of his presidency. I think we need to stop making that I'm on my way out, I'll just do
Agreed.
it before I leave. Let's make this more of a thing. And then on the front end, let's stop putting people in there that we got to let out early.
Agreed.
So
I think you're talking about President Trump. You can say his
that his
name.
name?
You can say his name. I'm in the middle. I don't care about any of that stuff.
yeah,
I care about
we're nonpartisan and
these sorts of things that better the, you know, there is I hate the terms left and right and all that good stuff. I like the saying there's a left wing and a right wing, but they're all connected to the same bird. Mm-hmm. You know, I
thought you were gonna say heart.
Oh no.
I was like,
That's fun. That's a good one.
Yeah.
But it's the sort of thing where we're all connected together, and these are just good practices and policies that are going to get, you know, if you're looking at it from a Democrat point of view, that takes a softer approach on crime and rehabilitates people. If you take a look at it from the Republican side of the house, you're reconnecting nuclear families and creating tax revenue. So there's a commonality in all of it, which is but if you actually stop and take a look at the person, mm-hmm. you know, I think the person gets overlooked in a lot of all this stuff.
and also our veterans that you were talking
Yep.
about earlier. I mean, if they are finding medicine, we need to treat our veterans better. I mean, the majority of the homeless population, there's large homeless population here in Arizona, is veterans.
Yep.
And mentally ill people. We need to stop criminalizing mental illness. And we need to listen, and some of us need to speak up.
Yep.
Like you were saying, that, you know, a lot of, upstanding people who smoke weed and do a lot of drugs. And people need to stop, you know, it kind of, what did President Clinton said, you know, I smoked it once, but I didn't inhale.
Oh, bullshit.
Yeah.
Come on.
People need to, I'm not saying like every person who smokes weed needs to like stand up and be like, I'll smoke weed. But like,
Right.
people need to stop acting like, it needs to become more normalized.
It needs to stop being spoken in hushed tones when you're at parties. Because guess what? I'm completely guilty of it in my own little area here. A new neighbor moved in, and I was like, hey, you smoke? And I was like, wait a minute. We don't have to be like that. We can talk about it.
And it's crazy because you would say for even a business dinner, you'd say, do you want to meet for a drink or a
Right.
cocktail? But you're not going to be like, I mean, I guess you kind of could in the weed industry or whatever. But
most of the execs don't smoke.
yeah. or they don't say they smoke.
Right. Agreed.
Because they want to be upstanding. And it's kind of like lots of people, it's a medicine.
It is.
I mean, lots of us upstanding people can take a medicine and it shouldn't be criminalized. So that's our entire mission at Last Prisoner Project, is just redressing these past and continuing harms that stem from these racist, xenophobic, classist policies and laws that are perpetuated and, lobbied for people's own financial interests and not actually the greater interests of society. And we talk about a lot of this stuff in Last Prisoner Project. Actually just launched a podcast.
Oh, nice.
And it's called Just Cannabis, Critical Candid Conversations.
Okay.
With the Triple C. And our director of impact, Michalina Belina, talks a lot on that. Season 1 covers like women who are incarcerated, like we were talking about earlier. And it kind of it's better advocating for more human-centric, anti-racist, cannabis policy and criminal justice reform, and opening up that conversation. So it's kind of in line with a lot of what you do, is just opening that door for that conversation. And I love what you're doing, by the way.
Thank you.
What you're doing is very unique in that it's rare to have someone who used to be law enforcement, who's coming, like how I was saying, some people need to speak up. That's awesome that you're openly saying, I use it medicinally and I used to be in law enforcement and I used to arrest people for it.
I posted a picture on my social media today of a dope load that I had. And it's like, and I've been asked the question of like, well, do you feel guilty? No, I don't feel guilty, because there's still a job to be done, but you can also do those things with compassion. And
you're doing so much now to open the conversation and to connect people. Because I mean, I have law enforcement, not in my immediate family, but in my extended family. So I think that I have a little more of a compassionate view. Whereas some people, if all you see is the news and you don't actually, like you were saying, human centric. It's like people villainize the police, people villainize the pot users, the police, and people on the right. And we need to stop villainizing each other and look at each other like as human beings.
One of the things, I'm not going to go into any part of it, but like there was a national tragedy that just happened a few days ago at a school shooting. That the response by law enforcement, I said I'm not going to get into any part of that, but the response by law enforcement has been praised by both the left and the right in this particular thing, because it's something that we can come together with and say, look, good cops doing good work.
Right.
You can look at the person and stop villainizing. And if you do just watch the news, all you're going to see is the bad. They're not going to show you
nobody's like, a great day in Arizona today, and back to you.
Right. Yeah, they're not going to show the human sides of it. And one of the things and I appreciate thank you for the compliment, because one of the things I'm trying to show is the fact that I'm going to make an assumption that you probably use cannabis. I haven't asked you directly yet. So I'm going to make that assumption. And I'm going to assume that most of the people that work at Last Prisoner Project probably use cannabis. You can be intelligent. You can be smart. You can be ambitious, you can be driven, you can do all of these things and still use it, even if you use it recreationally.
Well, I'm going to surprise you and say that I'm not a cannabis user.
Okay.
However, I think even if you don't use cannabis, you can still believe that it should be legal.
Amen.
And users and non-users, it's not like, just people who use it want it to be legal so they can freely get high and smoke dope.
Right.
It's also, there's people like me who I just prefer to be off the substances. Just the way my brain is. I got enough. I'm already crazy enough as it is. So, I mean, I'm not going to say I've never smoked cannabis before.
But you didn't inhale.
In my youth. No, and I didn't inhale either. But, I think that it benefits so many people. And just because I don't use it doesn't mean that people deserve to be in prison.
Right.
So it takes all different kind of perspectives, all different kind of people to make this work come together and have these kind of conversations. And that's why we encourage people to get involved in our programs. And so I'll talk a little bit about that.
Please do.
Okay. So first of all, we have 215 constituents in our legal program. And like I said, it's compassionate release, clemency. I kind of already went over the legal program, but we assign the pro bono attorneys who represent them on these motions and see them through. While they're incarcerated, we have the advocacy program. So we have a letter writing guide, which I actually gave you a copy of.
You guys gave me some really cool stuff. Thank you. And you can see in the background on her camera that there's a really cool banner, and then also the book regarding, and it shows, it profiles people who have been incarcerated. Yep. It talks about their time in and all that type of stuff. So
and it starts with the lifers.
Okay. Interesting.
So,
I will go through this.
Yeah, absolutely.
100%.
So we have 18,000 letters that have been written to our constituents through the letter writing program. You can find it on our website, lastprisonerproject.org.
Okay.
We have 70. So we have two programs. We have our partners participate in. So we have, sorry, I'm so bad with numbers. I wrote these numbers down. We have 75 Partners for Freedom who have products and donate to us a certain amount. And we have 4 different levels of partnerships. And you can shop with them, buy LPP products to support us.
Okay.
And there's 375 dispensaries who are enrolled in our Roll It Up for Justice program. Only one in Arizona.
That is okay.
Sunday Goods.
Okay.
Shout out Sunday Goods.
Shout out to Sunday Goods. I've never thought about that. That's an excellent strategy. So dispensaries, get your asses on board. These are your freaking clients. These are the people whose lives you can save.
Right. And it's as simple as like at the checkout, do you want to donate your 39 cents to the Last Prisoner Project? Why not? Or Chiba Hut had something where it was like, I think it was like 50% of the proceeds that day went to Last Prisoner Project. So Sunday Goods, love them. We've distributed $135,000 in commissary. Okay. 120 people have received commissary payments from us. As I mentioned, we also author we keep our letter writing guide up to date. That's only for the currently incarcerated constituents. We have a newsletter that we send out to our constituents who are incarcerated, but there's also one for just people who want to get involved and just know about this kind of stuff. Okay. And they can subscribe on our website. We also share the stories of our constituents. So, like I said, we have the Just Cannabis podcast. It's short form, so they're very digestible, short segments. And we have 2 episodes out of that so far. Gotcha. One of our campaigns we're working on is Kevin Allen, who is in Louisiana. He actually got life without parole for $20 worth of weed. $20 worth of weed that he sold to an undercover agent. And also he was found guilty by a split jury, which later they said was unconstitutional. Yeah. But they said retroactively doesn't matter. They said they're not going to retroactively go back and correct his sentence. And Governor Edwards hasn't taken any action on his state clemency petition. Luckily, a Last Prisoner Project pro bono attorney got him a resentencing. Okay. She filed an appeal all the way up through state Supreme Court, and he does have a resentencing hearing in May. Problem is, under the new law, which is not mandatory, even under the laws as written today, the recommended guideline would still be 20 years. Oh my God. Yeah. And so he's going to get resentenced. He served, I think, 8 years.
For $20 worth of weed.
Mm-hmm. Same thing with Fate Winslow. Fate Winslow got life. It was either life or 25 years, which is basically life to me.
Oh, and they do. I hope somebody corrects me on this or specifically, but it's my understanding that when they say 25 to life, that the 25 years is technically kind of considered a life sentence. So not obviously, but that can be up to that long, because that's a long freaking time to be in prison.
I mean, if you look at Richard DeLisi, who got sentenced to 90 years, that's longer than most people live.
Oh, by far.
So when you're stacking on these sentences that are consecutive, it's crazy. But so yeah, we're working on we're preparing to go to hearing to get him resentenced now. For our policy team, we've engaged in 25 states. We've testified in a handful of states. I think it's like 5 states we've testified in. We've been involved with 17 automatic record clearance and resentencing bills. And actually, that's how I got connected with you. Was Arizona Normal, John Udell connected us.
Shout out to John. Love John.
So, and then for our reentry, we have given out 364 reentry grants this year. We've distributed $2 million in reentry resources.
That's awesome.
And that's for housing, transportation, can't talk, dependents, medical, and then cannabis industry education, our job readiness program to get them ready to go back into the workforce.
They probably can't get a job in cannabis, I know that I don't know specifically, but I don't think you can have a felony on your record and get yourself either a facility agent or a dispensary agent card.
Not in Arizona. Not in Arizona. So, and same thing, like I actually looked into Prop 207 before it came out when I was in law school at Ohio State. I took 2 different classes. One was sentencing with, shout out Professor Doug Berman. He's my favorite. That's why I actually work at Last Prisoner Project. He connected me. And then I think he recommended me to take a marijuana policy class where I studied Prop 207 and looked at that. And it's crazy, like if the limitations on criminal record that there are, like if you can't go work for, you can't like start a dispensary or anything like that.
Right.
And it's just kind of education, scholarships, and training to get them back into the workforce. However, it does depend. I mean, I'm not familiar with all the state's laws, but I know that here in Arizona, you're right, there are limitations.
And it's just the sort of thing where now, if I get caught smoking it out in public, it's a petty offense. I could go do whatever I want. It's just the sort of thing where we're just going to continue to punish I do believe that prison is, no matter what the crime is, prison is your punishment. When you're done with prison, you should be re-entered back into society fully and wholly. You have done your time. You have served your time. You have paid your debt to society. But at the same time, if we're just breeding worse criminals, and I have an uncle who did prison time. He called it gladiator school. So it's a sort of thing where if we're just breeding more crime and making people worse, this isn't helping anybody. It just continues to harm and harm and harm.
Absolutely. Totally agree. And it's crazy when you look at the collateral consequences. Like, I think might be saying this wrong, but I think it's like the National Center of Collateral Consequences. If you just Google collateral consequences study or data or something, it will take you to a website where there's studies of all the collateral consequences on licensure, civil penalties, like how things, I mean, some people can't apply. I've had some of our constituents who've got charged with marijuana, convicted, they can't apply for federal money or federal housing for 10 years. They can apply for any assistance. And then they're like, okay, good luck. And
what do you do? You go back to committing crime.
Yep.
You go back, you sell drugs to support your family. You rob liquor stores to support your family.
Right.
Like, it's just crazy.
It is really crazy. So, and there's 70 to 100 million Americans, can't talk right now, who have a criminal record. So this is something that's really pervasive. So a lot of people will be familiar with the collateral consequences. Yeah. And I mean, like you said, it can, I think we're not recording yet, but it can affect your career. It can affect, being charged for something, or even just arrested. Yep. Background checks, housing. Yep. Even if you're not convicted of something. So that stuff
never goes away. It's always there.
I wrote an article that got turned into a book.
Okay.
And it's called Ban the Box, the fight to box out employers from discriminating on the basis of criminal record. I forget the name of my own book, but it was a paper originally. And it's kind of funny because Professor Berman was like, the sentencing professor at Ohio State College of Law was like, there's no page limit, but don't write a book or anything. And I literally wrote a book. That was the sentence I wrote first class.
Sometimes you got something to say.
Yeah. And I studied that. And I looked into all the data on that. And the these third-party background check companies.
Been verified and all that type of stuff.
Oh my gosh, they can just, even if you're acquitted of something or you weren't ultimately charged, you were just arrested.
No.
And remember, in this country, it's supposed to be innocent until proven guilty.
It's supposed to be.
People can't, like, they can't get a job or they can't get housing because this thing is on, even though the charge has gone away.
Right.
It's still on there.
Yep, still on the record.
And what I recommend that people do, because there's no real process for this, is either go to a record clearing house, just Google record clearing house, and then also individually email all the background check companies that your charge could show up on.
Okay.
And ask them to take it down.
Okay.
And maybe throw a statute in there, make it look more threatening.
But, so you're asking them to redact it. You're asking for your information to be redacted.
Demanding them to redact it.
You're demanding it.
And you're making it like you do have. You're making it sound like there's some authority behind it too.
Of course.
That's what I would throw in.
Well, the authority should be innocent until proven guilty.
Right. Exactly.
Should be.
But if they become aware of that and you ask them because of the opt out and privacy laws, they do have to take it off within a reasonable amount of time. And it does take a while, but it's really worth it. And but besides retroactive relief, we need to make it so that, we need to have, these charges need to not be in the system to be sold to a third-party background company.
It's all about money.
When that charge doesn't stick.
Right.
If you're convicted of something that's not overturned, then I have no problem with that being on the record. But the fact that anything goes, anything goes, arrests, things that got dismissed by the prosecution was like, we don't have enough to prove this case. We're going to dismiss it. That's still on your record. And that's why we need auto clearance records, and we need these retroactive laws and then prospective laws to kind of prevent this from even becoming an issue in the first place. We need to reschedule or deschedule cannabis.
That needs to happen immediately. And it's the DEA that's in charge of that. And the problem is they get a lot of their funding to go fight cannabis. Yeah. I'm working on trying to get a DEA agent in here. I'm also kind of scared to get a DEA agent in here.
Yeah.
Like, I won't lie. But
they can. I don't think they can get you, right?
It's
Maybe
federally illegal.
True.
True. So that's the people ask me that, like, on the law enforcement side of the house. I'm like, oh no, a federal agent is not going to make a traffic stop on you. An FBI agent is not going to pull you over. A DEA agent is not going to pull you over. If a DEA agent is pulling you over, it's because you're doing something else and they're there for a reason. So, they don't get you for speeding. They don't have the authority to pull you over for speeding.
Right.
So, but
get them in here.
Yeah, no, I'm working on it.
Yeah, talk to him. So, I just want to say, before we move on, just some people don't realize how many 40,000 are incarcerated, and they think, oh, do they just get like 1 year? 2 years. It's, first of all, 1 or 2 years is still a lot of time in prison. You go try to be in prison for 1 or 2 years. Oh, it's just 2 years. And then also, as you could see from our letter writing guide, which is it's sorted from longest sentences to least sentences. We have a ton of lifers. Released lifers include Corvain Cooper, Andy Cox, Horacio Estrada Elias, John Knock, Michael Pelletier, Richard DeLisi, Pharrell Scott, Cornell Hood, Fate Winslow, who is deceased, rest in peace. And then we also have currently incarcerated, Guy Tandinelli, Rafael Hernandez Carrillo, Ismael Lira, Albert Madrid, Hector Ruben McGurk, Daniel Nunez, Michael Woods, and Kevin Allen, who I was talking about earlier.
So I'm just reading this one real quick. Rafael Hernandez Carrillo. Okay, 2010, age 31. He was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole for his involvement in a cannabis distribution operation. Okay, so he was probably, whatever happened. Yet the drug cartels are making billions and billions of dollars. Billions of dollars.
Yeah.
And murdering people.
Yep.
And they're pretty much scot-free.
Yep. It's really crazy. But so luckily we've made a lot of progress. We've had 21 people released so far in 2023 of our illegal constituents. We have gotten the lifers released that I mentioned before. Michael Thompson released from Michigan. Filong Chung was released on compassionate release federally. And Luke Scarmazzo, another person, I think he got 25 years, he recently was granted compassionate release. And then we got news today that one of our constituents, Thomas Anderson, is going to be released on Thursday.
Very cool. And where's he at?
I think he's at, I don't want to he's federal,
Gotcha.
but I don't want to misspeak on where his facility is. But it's in there.
On that note, though, real quick, being that it is federal, I keep forgetting that part. Where are most of the people for cannabis convictions housed? Where, you know what I mean?
We see a lot of USP Beaumont. Well, so a lot of people go to Big Sandy in Kentucky first before they get transferred out. And actually, here in Arizona, there's a federal facility where the overpopulation goes.
Okay.
So a lot of people are at USP Beaumont. A lot of people are in Yazoo City.
I don't even know where that's at.
I'm forgetting the names right now, but a lot of these places are like these federal facilities, FCI Milan, USP Pollock.
Okay.
Those are a lot of the more common facilities. And then it's crazy because you see in different federal district courts that are situated in certain states and certain districts, they tend to sentence harsher, or certain judges
Really?
tend, when I'm looking at a lot of the lifers or people who have 15, 20-year sentences, I'm like, I just saw that judge.
I was going to say it's probably the same judge over and over.
It's a lot of the same judges, and it's just outrageous. And you also see that depending on obviously what state you're in, the harsher sentences. If you're happen to be driving through Kansas,
the South,
yeah. So there's just a lot of variation. There's not equal consequences, and there's too much and not enough discretion, because that's a hard one, because it was like you were saying with they need to be able to have the discretion at the police level, but then when you look at just prosecutorial discretion, that's when you see more people of color being prosecuted for the same exact crime as white people.
This is just a theory. I do believe that one of the easiest felony arrests that I could have made as a police officer here in the state of Arizona was a cannabis arrest. Okay, so I'm a trooper. I'm going about my work week, and I've made some traffic stops, and I've taken an accident. I've done this and stuff like that. But what makes you really shine is that of a felony arrest. That's like, oh, look, this officer had 2 or 3 felony arrests this week. It doesn't matter what the felony was, but it's the low-hanging fruit.
Right.
And so when you get this low-hanging fruit where prosecutors are going to get a quick prosecution, it's going to make their numbers go up. And I know this for a fact here. I have to sneeze, pardon me, so I'm trying not to. It's coming, and my allergies are driving me crazy. But I know for a fact that some of the prosecutors here in Arizona that have started off in particularly the Maricopa County Attorney's Office, they want their numbers to be high, because what they're going to do is they're going to take that numbers and they're going to go to a private law firm and they say, look, I had a 97% conviction rate. I'm good. So it was more along the lines of making themselves look better and look at the conviction rate that I get. Just give that person, just get them convicted. Doesn't matter what the conviction is. Doesn't matter the sentence or anything like that. Just get them convicted so it makes themselves look better. The police officer is going to make that arrest because it makes themselves look better. You know what I mean? It's just the low. This is just a theory that pulling over people or dealing with people from a lower socioeconomic status, as we stated before, they're not going to have the means to go hire the $50,000 lawyer that's going to get them off. It's going to be that low-hanging fruit. And I don't mean that, in a bad way. That's just, unfortunately, the way it is. It's going to make that officer look better. It's going to make that prosecutor look better. And as you said, the defense attorneys, the public defenders, don't have the means, don't have the time, don't have the ability. They're overworked. They're underpaid. So it's just a constant revolving door.
A lot of these are societal problems that your listeners probably feels overwhelming and like, well, what am I supposed to do about it? And I would like to talk a little bit about what they can do.
I was just going to ask, like, how can people, like, being with Arizona Normal, I know how we can affect changes at the state level, but how can we affect changes across the nation?
So first, visit lastprisonerproject.org/take-action.
Okay.
And that's going to cover most of what I'm about to say. Follow us on our socials, and we write, we participate in our amicus briefs, post those. We have a blog.
Okay.
We have,
Friend of the court.
yes.
Friend of the court
yes.
briefs.
Inform yourself. Check out our podcast, Just Cannabis. Text FREEDOM to 24365. Sign up for our letter writing guide or check it out on our website. Sign up for our newsletter. And participate as a partner in our Partners for Freedom or our Roll It Up for Justice campaign. So in addition to just either donating or helping us secure funds to operate our programs to help people, there's also things that people can do as far as awareness and advocacy. And they should check out our Pardons to Progress campaign, pardonstoprogress.com. Or is it .org? Let me see. It is .com.
Okay.
And also take part in our campaigns, like the one that, excuse me, hashtag Free Kevin Allen, I'm losing my voice. Asking to, sorry, I lost my train of thought.
Free Kevin Allen, hashtag Free Kevin Allen.
Oh, yeah. Writing to governors. So check out our website and see our campaigns.
Okay.
And there's, I'm like losing it. Where you sign, there's petitions.
Online petitions.
There are things that you can share, writing and calling governor's offices, participating in our Pardons to Progress campaign, writing our constituents letters. People don't realize how much they love that and how much that really can brighten their day. Hearing from people, even if it's just something small, like you're not forgotten.
Yeah.
Just thinking of you.
Yeah.
We're going to free you. We're going to get you out. And just knowing that those people, letting them know that they haven't been forgotten. And then vote. Get out and vote. Educate yourself. And elect people that are in line with your value system. Listen to more than one news source.
Right.
And
do you guys
have
put
these
out
talks.
Do you guys put out any kind of newsletter stating your position specifically regarding the voting? I didn't mean to interrupt you. I apologize.
Oh, you're okay.
But it was specifically regarding voting. Do you guys put out any kind of newsletter stating these are the types of people that we want to vote in that have our...
We don't do that because 501c3.
Gotcha.
We can't.
Understood.
Yeah.
I'm Normal's a 501c4, so we do that. We go
Right.
through the constituent or the list and give it to our constituents and all that stuff. So
Right. I mean, we do cover on our blog and in our socials like things that officials do.
Yeah.
Because it's just news. And we don't really say like, oh, we like this person or we hate this person.
Gotcha.
It's just kind of where we put it out there.
Gotcha.
And so just having these conversations, listening to people's stories and, really engaging in this kind of conversation is helpful as it is. And then taking that additional step to participate in our campaigns and, do something to even just brighten a constituent, a prisoner, a cannabis prisoner's day. And also, most importantly, in my opinion, is people who are in law and want to provide pro bono legal services, licensed attorneys and their firms or clinics at law schools can sign up on NACDL's website, or they can reach out to Last Prisoner Project.
Okay.
info@lastprisonerproject.org. Or you can Google Cannabis Justice Initiative, NACDL.
Awesome. And I'll include all this stuff in the notes and all that stuff.
Yes. And we also have a volunteer form for non-attorneys but that's a little more limited. We just need more attorneys. More attorneys to help more more people get out and more resources for us to do the work that we do.
Everybody hates attorneys until you need an attorney, and then you love attorneys, and then it's like, oh my God, I wish I was one.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, that's very cool. And I you have given me an hour and 45 minutes of your time, so I'm truly grateful of this. And when you and I talked just a few weeks ago, I had not even heard of the Last Prisoner Project. I thought it was another organization, but I had never even heard of it. And then I started doing research. I was going, this is a really neat thing. This is very cool.
Absolutely. Thank you. And thank you so much again for the work that you do and having people on here like me to talk about our work. And, I love that you're looking into the law enforcement, looking into connecting the public with law enforcement.
100%.
And law with policy,
Yep.
policy with incarceration with reentry, rectifying the past and continuing harms of this, this country's unfortunate policies and history of cannabis criminalization.
Yep.
So everything that you're doing is super helpful, and I really appreciate you giving me the opportunity to come here and speak on behalf of the Last Prisoner Project.
And again, I appreciate you coming down here, so thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much, and we'll see where this goes, and I'm excited to get this message out there.
All right,
Awesome.
thank you.
Let me turn all this stuff off.